And just like the NAACP stood up when another tragedy in Mississippi, taking the life of young Emmett Till, we will stand up for Nolan Wells. Just like the NAACP and civil rights leaders stood up when another Mississippi son was taken in Medgar Evers. We will stand up for Nolan Wells. And just like too many of our young people, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Botham Jean, Terrence Crutcher, Stephon Clark, Sandra Bland, Atiana Jefferson, Alton Sterling, Eric Gardner, George Floyd, Tamir Rice, the young people who I was trying to focus on. Gary, we stand up until we get the truth, until we get justice for Nolan Wells. 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 Justice for Nolan Wells.
What we just witnessed with this Ben Crump press conference, it wasn't simply a press conference. This is what I'm going to call a racial liturgy, right? First, you got to invoke the history of slavery and segregation. And he even brought up, look how far back he had to go. He had to bring up Emmett Till and Medgar Evers. He connected the present case, Nolan Wells, to this list of familiar Black deaths. You got Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin. I mean, he went down the list. He got a pretty impressive list. It doesn't matter, right? Forget the fact that the list of the Black deaths, probably 98% of them are just mired in falsehood and race hoaxes themselves. But, we can examine them case by case. But third, what he did was he treated every unanswered question as if the evidence pointed to institutional racism. And we don't even have any evidence. But he just alludes to it and infers and implies. Fourth thing he does, he parades, and I'm using this word, they're not victims because they're allowing themselves, but he's introducing this grieving family. That part is important. The way they hold her hand and rub her back and give her the stage to let her cry. And it's sick. But they're active participants at this point. And then after they introduce the grieving family, they got to rile up the audience, right? Make them chant. Make them chant and repeat the incantation. Make them clap too. Whatever it takes, the more the merrier. Justice for Nolan Wells, right? Justice for Nolan Wells. They're demanding justice before having established an injustice. It's amazing how they do that. And then finally, let me show it to you again. You see this? They position, look. These people here are all assembled, and you have the illiterate and ignorant activist attorney who I don't understand how none of the people in this room know, whose reputation, this man's reputation precedes him. He is known as being the race-baiting, lying, hustling, ambulance-chasing attorney who can't talk, read, or probably write well. I don't know. He is the indispensable intermediary between, as Al Sharpton says, Black people in America and truth. He's the go-between. Y'all remember Al Sharpton said that Ben Crump's the Attorney General of Black America. They do this all the time. It happens over and over again. The names change. The cities change. The facts change. But the script remains the same. You must always have a victim. There must always be a racial villain. There must always be, you got to have a corrupt institution. And there's always going to be a Ben Crump or an Al Sharpton or a Jamal Bryant to stand in front of the cameras. And they're the ones responsible for translating your pain and turning it into political theater. This is what the Democrats pay them for. That's what they're paid to do. These men can't afford. They cannot afford for Black people to examine every case on its own merit. Just look at things independently. They can't have that. They need your reflexes conditioned. They need to be able to say Mississippi and you hear lynching. And then it echoes, lynching, lynching, lynching. And you're looking around suspicious and scared, right? They need that. They need to say the words young Black man. And you hear, when it goes in here and it comes out this way, you hear murdered by white people. Mm-hmm. That's what they need you to hear. They know the buzzwords to say, and they know how it's going to be translated back to them. But they need to say the words, what is it? Undetermined as it relates to the manner and cause of death. And they need you to hear cover up, right? They say justice, and you start chanting before you don't even know what happened. You just like a lemming. You just going along with it. This is the conditioning. This is the conditioning. Earlier today, before I wrap this up and go, I was on John Amachukwu's show. Virgil was filling in for him. Virgil Walker. Shout out to the big homie Virgil. Virgil was filling in for John Amachukwu today. And on there, I explained that as I was watching this press conference, I thought about the children of Israel. And when you think about the story in Exodus, God delivers Israel from the hand of Egypt. And I can't even imagine being alive back then. Like all of these miraculous signs and wonders, like he struck Egypt with a boatload of plagues. Before they even left, the plagues came. Yahweh, the God of the Bible, parts the Red Sea. Have you ever seen a sea? The waters parted. These people walked on dry land, and he destroys Pharaoh's army that's pursuing them, right? The scriptures say, and the sea covered them, right? And it says like they sank like lead in the mighty waters. The Egyptian empire, the army, the strong arm of the region of that time, whole army gets covered in the sea. Yahweh, by his mighty hand, led his people by a pillar of cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night. Can you imagine? We've been enslaved for 111 years, and all of a sudden, we just leave. And we walk through a sea with waters, dry land. The army's behind us. The sea covers them. It's daytime, and we have this pillar of cloud. And at night, we have fire. It gets better. He fed them manna from heaven. Literally, manna is, what is this? Like, it ain't really bread, but not really. Who cares? We still don't know what this substance was, but it was sustenance and nourishment that the children of Israel needed to survive. Yahweh brought water out of a rock, okay? Yet after all of that, Israel. You know what they wanted? These ungrateful jokers started longing for Egypt. Can you believe that, y'all? I was like, how can you be so ungrateful? Let me read y'all. Numbers 11, 5 through 6. It says, we remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing. Oh, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. Let me tell you something. If I was God, I'd be like, I'm about to kill them all. Just kill them all. Like, I'm done. Right? Nothing left but this manna to look at. How ungrateful and entitled do you have to be? They are reminiscing about the food back in Egypt, not even realizing that the food didn't cost them nothing. At least they thought it cost them nothing. They paid for it with their labor. They paid for it with their liberty. They were slaves. They paid for it with their dignity. They paid for it with the blood of their sons. But it's interesting because the bondage that they were in has so distorted their memories that these nut jobs were thinking that slavery felt safer than freedom. Why is that? You know why? Egypt was familiar, right? But now they're out and they're free. That freedom is uncertain. The comforts of slavery in Egypt gave them a predictable ration. We know what we gonna get. We get the onions and the leeks and the melons and don't forget them cucumbers, right? But freedom required that they had to trust God, not Pharaoh, but God. So they physically left Egypt, but Egypt had not left them. Then in Numbers 13 and 14, I'm not going to read it. It's when the spies are sent into Canaan, right? They arrive. They real close to the promised land. 12 spies go and scope the place out. They go and examine the land. 10 of them return, but their report is like rooted in fear. They're afraid. Joshua and Caleb are the ones that are like, we're going to trust the promises of God. But the people, they chose to believe the frightening report. Oh, they grumbled. They grumbled, got super rebellious. They were so desperate that they're like, give us a leader. We need somebody else. You, Joshua, no. Give us a new leader. They even talked about going back to Egypt. God delivers them from bondage, brings them to the edge of their inheritance, and they essentially said, we would rather go back. Oh, their problem wasn't that they didn't have sufficient evidence. Why? God gave them miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. Their problem was unbelief. When you read in Hebrews, it says that they were unable to enter because of unbelief. Do you know what happened to them? An entire generation just wandered for 40 years until they died. They died in the wilderness, and they didn't die. It wasn't because God forgot his promises. It wasn't because his GPS wasn't working and he didn't know, like, oh my goodness, how am I going to get him through? That wasn't it. God didn't forget the directions. They died because they were rebellious. They were stiff-necked. They didn't want to trust God enough to even enter it. This is what I see. When I look out at all of these middle age or post-middle age, the whole people in this crowd chanting justice for Nolan, this is not Gen Z. This is not Gen Alpha. These aren't even the majority millennials. These are mostly silent generations, some boomers, and some geriatric Gen Xers. That's who these people are. This is the spiritual condition that I saw reflected in this room. What I just described with the children of Israel, you have a racial grievance industry that has trained generations of Black Americans to remember Egypt way more vividly than they remember deliverance. No, they're going to remind you every day, oh, slavery. You know, slavery had happened. They weren't even alive to experience, but they're going to remind you of slavery happened. They're not going to remind you, like the children of Israel, of the blood on the doorposts and the sacrifices, right? They're not going to remind you of that. And in their instance, they don't think about the blood that was shed, the Black blood, and the freed Black men and the white men who fought and died. And who were they fighting? They were fighting Democrats to ensure that slavery ended. They don't talk about that. They want to remind you of the segregation and how that happened, but they're not going to permit you to celebrate all of the extraordinary opportunities, all of the accomplishments that are available to Black Americans today. There are no roadblocks in your way. None. But they're going to remind you that America once denied Black people their constitutional birthright. But these same stiff-necked people, these same rebellious ones will become furious when you tell Black Americans to stand upright, exercise your birthright, function in your freedom. No, they don't teach history as a testimony to God's provision and his faithfulness with human courage. No, they use history as a psychological chain. The message is never, look what the Lord has done. The message is always, look what white people are still doing to you. I told y'all where this came from. Remember, you're never satisfied. King told you, we will never be satisfied. So that means you're never delivered. You are never free. You never arrive. Forget the fact that God made you free. No. MLK told you, we won't be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. And if you know your scripture, that's the fulfillment of all things when Christ returns to take us home. So in other words, never. This side of heaven, nah, we ain't gonna never be satisfied. We're gonna keep begging, whining, crying, marching, demanding, looking to the government, taking your eyes off Christ, who's and the God of the Bible, who's the author and finisher of your faith. No, forget that. They don't want you focused on that. Pharaoh is always chasing behind you in a chariot. They coming. The plantation is always being rebuilt. You have a sitting congressman, one district over, talk about if you don't vote Democrat in November, you're going to be back picking cotton. And that man said it with a straight face. And then the furry, the little chubby furry with all the sexual nasty stuff on his computer, Roland Martin, he repeated it, talking about it's serious. We're going to be back picking cotton. Jim Crow is always returning. They keep forgetting to tell you that Jim Crow was an aberration of the Democrat. Like, those were Democrats. They don't want you to remember that. It's amazing to me. Jim Crow's always coming back. You always have to live with the fear that another lynching is right around the corner. You never know. They might just string you up on a tree right in front of your house and ain't nobody gonna do nothing. It's amazing though, because conveniently, the Democrat Party, NAACP, Ben Crump, Al Sharpton, all of them, they're the ones that must always stand between you and annihilation. Lord knows, what would we do without them? How would we survive if we didn't have the NAACP and the Democrats protecting us from the big old boogeyman white man? These men are not leading Black people out of Egypt. No. Their power depends upon convincing Black people that Egypt is everywhere. It's everywhere. They need a permanent Pharaoh. They need you out here singing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot till the day you die. They need a permanent wilderness. This is why the Black community looks the way it is. They are just wandering in permanent crisis. A permanent group of cowardly, frightened, and emotionally dependent people who will chant on cue when instructed. They will vote blue no matter who. And they will suspend all discernment whenever the racial script demands it. That's what we looked at. That is what we looked at. This is what that is. You're never free. I'm surprised they didn't break out in a Negro spiritual after all of this. Take it in. Take in the silent generation, these baby boomers, and these geriatric Gen Xers that are going to die in the wilderness. Do not die with them. You don't need to wander in a circle, opining for the comforts of Egypt. You are free. Go and function in your freedom and leave these 2-bit race hustling jokers alone.